and welcome to Sarah's Temporary Treat. Today I'm going to be creating a card with this really cute little tropical toucan from Altenew, and it's got a little coordinating die as well. I quite like sometimes getting these small stamps as opposed to a whole set, because you can kind of choose the individual elements and pair them with bigger sets. I just thought it'd be nice to make a tropical card. It's going to have a see-through back to add a bit of dimension, and I also kind of want to make a partial wreath, and part of the reason for that is that I bought the Altenew Stampwheel. I'm desperate to have a try with it. This is actually the first time I'm going to use it, so I have opened it before, but I'm going to show you as well just in case you've not seen it. So it's a stamping platform, and like I said, I've already set it up, so these actually came from on the photopolymer piece underneath. You can see it's really nicely packaged. So all I've done is taken the plastic off this so it's nice and shiny, and also there's this photopolymer piece in the bottom of the stamp platform, and that helps the card stick to it, so that's really useful too. So I've got a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 piece of cardstock, this Nina Solar White for £80, and I want to put that in the middle of my stamp wheel. So I'm going to pop this in here, and this photopolymer base holds my cardstock in place without being overly sticky, so I'm not going to have any problems taking it up, but equally it's going to keep it in place. So that's really nice because it means I can stamp the whole of this, whereas stamp platforms that I've had before, you've had to put a magnet or something on it. So Altenew kindly added a set of these embellishments in with the stamp wheel for me. I think they must do it with all the stamp wheels, to make sure that you know where the bottom is, because obviously you want to turn this round, but you want to know where you started. So we're going to create a wreath today, because that's the main point of having the stamp wheel versus any of the other stamp positioner tools. I do have kind of workarounds for making wreaths on other videos, so I'll link one of those below so that if you don't have the stamp wheel you can see how to make a template for a wreath. The ones that I've got templates for are for square cards, but you can just do the same but with a rectangular cutout. But that's the good thing about this, you don't need to make a new template every time you want to make a wreath. So I'm going to use, you've probably seen me use this stamp set, which is the Altenew Garden Delights, like a gazillion times because I've used it on so many videos. But it's a really good one, and it's got a couple of layering flowers and a couple of layering leaves. We're just going to use the leaves in this one. So I'm going to start out with the outline, and I'm just going to position there. So I know I'm going to want this in the middle, so I want to make sure I've got space for that. So then I'm going to position the outlines of the stamps. I'm going to position it so that I know it will fit around the toucan. So I'm going to start off with this one, and then I'm going to add in the other one in a second. So I'm going to ink up this stamp, then I'm going to line it up so that this is at the bottom so that I know where I am. So then I'm going to want this to kind of fit into this pattern. So what I'm going to do, I'm kind of just eyeballing it at the moment. In fact, I might stamp a couple of these ones first so that I can see where the other one fits in. So I'm going to rotate this 2, so you can see that was 1. So that was where we started, then that's 1 and that's 2. So I'm going to rotate it 2 round, and then I'm going to stamp it. And then I want this to fit in as well, so that we get kind of like a nice pattern going on. I think I might have that like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have that here, and then that I've turned around 2. So then I need to turn that another 2, 1, 2, so that it's facing over to this side. I'm talking about the heart here. And then I'm going to pick up this one, and then I'm going to ink up the 2 of them. And so then I'm going to add that on here. And then I'm going to ink them both up again. And then I'm going to turn it round 2 more. So now this is facing into the corner. And it is quite easy to slot back in because these fit really tightly into the corners, so you can really feel where they need to go. And so now that I've kind of got going, I kind of know that my heart is either going to be pointing like north, south, east, west, or to one of these corners, so that makes it kind of easier to decide where I'm going. And I really wanted this, but one of the things that I was worried about was whether it would be easy enough to put it back in place and re-stamp, because obviously normally you can just kind of close your stamp thing again, but actually because they fit so tightly into the corners, then you can see that's a perfect stamp again on top, so it does actually work really well. So that's one of the things that I was worried about, that actually works really nicely. I would say that I'd like to have a grid underneath to line up my paper on, but I think I'm going to end up creating a grid underneath for that. You can see how this is working out really nicely. And I love how well this is sticking down the cardstock. That's working really, really nicely. And I've just realised that I've got to the end with this one, but I still need to do a couple of stamps with the smaller one because obviously I started later with that one. So I'm just going to finish off with a couple of those. So this is my stamp chamois, so I'm just going to use that, and that cleans that off really nicely. I'll clean my stamps with that as well. And after I've finished, I'm going to clean off that edge with that as well. So then I'm going to stamp this in the middle. I'm actually going to die cut that out later. It's not going to stay just stamped because we want the see-through element to it. But I'm just going to stamp that. So I'm going to try and get used to having this heart down the bottom. And this is a new stamp, so I might actually have to stamp twice with this, so we'll see. I'm just going to do it again just for that little bit on the beak. So the other thing that I quite like with this is that it's fairly kind of like solid all the way over, you know, like on a normal one that flips down, this end obviously kind of pushes down a lot more than this end because that end's kind of fixed, whereas this is kind of an even pressure all the way across. So the other thing I want to do, because I'm doing a module of my Altenew educator course called Transcending Tattoo Techniques, and that talks a bit about layering up with black. So I'm going to do that on my leaves. And the nice thing about this is that I can just choose a leaf over here and a leaf over there, and because we're going to be spinning, it will do all of them. And the other nice thing about this, normally I wouldn't probably do quite so many layered stamps if I was doing this much stamping, because it's quite a process to line them all up. But obviously with this one, once I've lined it up once, then I can just kind of turn it round and they'll all be lined up. Let's see where we were. So we've got the heart down. There we go, and you can see I've got that nice detail on both those. It's perfectly lined up, and it will stay lined up as I go around. So now I need to make sure that the heart goes into this corner here. So then the heart's out to the side. And the nice thing is as well that I can layer the two stamps at once by having them kind of like separated out, which really saves time on what I'm doing. And again, I could just clean both the platform and the stamps with my stamp chamois. It's actually a lawn fawn one that I've had for ages. I'm not really actually sure whether they still do them or not. The other thing that this is really good for, because the bottom is photopolymer, so it holds this really nicely. It also holds your stencils nicely, so I can't wait to kind of use it soon to do some stenciling as well, because I think that's going to be really useful. So then I'm just going to clean this with my stamp chamois as well. You can see that's really nice and clean now. So then I'm going to bring in a scrap piece of paper because I want to colour this, but I'm going to be colouring over here with alcohol markers, so I don't want to stain my mouth. So I've pulled out my Mystic Garden set, my Space Garden set, and my Sunshine Valley Garden set of Altenew markers. I'm going to be using mostly this one, but I'll probably use bits of the other ones too. So I've obviously got out my alcohol markers for this, but if you're looking for a bit of a quicker card, you could also use the layer of the stamps that colours the whole leaves, and you could just stamp over some green. So that was the Mountain Pine. Then I'm just going to do some slightly lighter with the Shadow Creek. So then I'm going to colour around this with the polar bear from this Mystic Garden set. And I'm also going to leave a little border around the edge on the inside of here, because I'm going to cut the inside out, so I want to make sure I don't have any white edges. This is also a good way, so if you make any mistakes, I don't know if you can see that I've just gone over the line slightly there, I can just kind of blend that out with my pen, and you can barely see it now. So then I'm going to use my Arctic Mountain for the main part of the toucan. I know they're usually black, but I'm going for navy. I'm doing that mostly so that you can see a bit of the detailing. I'm going to use this dark night, which is kind of a really dark tealy type colour. I'm going to use that to pick up some of the detail as well. And then I'm going to use Butternut for the beak. And I'm going to add in some of this Pastel Sunrise to give a bit more of the kind of orangey. And then I'm just going to go around this with the polar bear as well. So then I'm going to take the coordinating die and I'm going to cut my little toucan out. And I run that through my die cutting machine. So then I've got my die cut toucan and I've got my piece here. And I'm going to grab my scissors and I'm going to cut around the inside edge of the wreath. So then I've got my wreath with the cutout in the middle. So I've made a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch acetate card blank, and I'm going to just use some tape runner to add this onto the back. So then I've cut these two pieces of, I think this cardstock's called GLACIER from Spellbinders. I've cut it 3/4 inch smaller than the card front, and I'm going to just use my tape runner to add that on as well. And then I'm going to put the other one on the back. Then I'm going to add some foam paint to the back of my toucan. And then I've also stamped this Happy Birthday, and that is from this birthday greeting stamp set. You can see this is another one that's really well used. I just stamped that onto some of the GLACIER cardstock and cut it out. And I'm going to add that to my card as well. So I was originally going to have this in the middle, but actually I think it's going to look cute off to the side like this. And then I'm going to pop this onto some foam pads as well. So I'm just going to cut little thin strips. Now I've got this really cool card, but I am going to swerve a little bit because when you open it, I don't like this inside, so I'm going to cut the card front off on this, and then I'll show you what we're going to do with that in a second. So then I've got a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch GLACIER card blank, and I've got this gold alcohol ink. I'm going to take the dropper top off and dip my paintbrush in. And then I'm going to do a few gold flicks across. So then I still want that kind of window effect. So I'm going to pop that up on there, and you can just see a bit of the paint splatters through. I'm just going to pop some foam pads behind here. And then I can also put foam pads behind where the toucan is, because you're not going to see that either. The other thing that I will say is really useful that I found when I was stamping the sentiment with the stamp wheel is that you can just use like an oddment of cardstock. Like previously I would have had to have something that I could have lined up on the corner of a stamp positioning tool, or something that was big enough so that it could fit my sentiment and be held down by a magnet to be used nicely. But with the stamp wheel, because it sticks the cardstock in place, I could just use a little scrap of cardstock. You can see what I used, it's just like an offcut of something. And I didn't need to line it up in the corner, so it didn't need to be straight. I didn't need to have space for a magnet, although to be fair on this one I would have had. But it meant I could just put it down and not worry about all that kind of thing, which was really useful. And then by popping this up, we're still maintaining that kind of like window look, like a floating look, but we don't have the kind of almost dirty inside that I had before. Now if I was to just put the slatters behind there, I'm kind of looking at this thinking actually it would make a nice shaky card as well. So that's today's card finished. If you like it, I'd really appreciate you clicking like below, and you can also press subscribe if you'd like to see future videos. If you press the bell button and select all, then YouTube will also notify you when I have a new video available. All of the products that I've used for today's card are listed in the description below, and you can also find a link there to my blog where you can find a picture supply list if that helps you find what you're looking for. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope to see you again soon.